I don't know how your week has been, but this one's been rough for me. So let's kick back, drink a Coke, and take a look at another estate sale find. This is the Panasonic SL-H203 automatic turntable. Like me, it's from sometime in the 1980s. I couldn't find the exact year. We got it at an estate sale last weekend in Palm Springs. Stoked. Today I thought we'd spend a little time talking about the line level and phono level outputs and why you need a phono preamp to make everything work properly. And I thought this unusual looking turntable would be a great excuse for us to go over that for those of you who don't already know this stuff. But before we get into it, let's talk about the turntable itself. So as I said, this is the Panasonic SL-H203 automatic turntable. It's a belt-driven low to medium end turntable with a lot of really cool features for its price point, which I would like to show you. My favorite part of this unit is the little rounded bit on the dust cover. They didn't just make it rectangular. The largest and most obvious button is the start-stop control, with the disc size selector to the left of it. Your speed selector switch is off to the far left side. Inside the dust cover, you have the tone arm with the cartridge and stylus, the cueing lever that raises a little piston that lifts and lowers the tone arm, the lock, and your anti-skate adjustment. We'll just leave that alone for now. In the back is the 45 adapter. This turntable also has something I've never seen before. It's got a little hat. In the center of the platter, we actually have an automatic record changer spindle. The hat on top is actually a spring-loaded stabilizer for the record changer. It has a telescoping piston that keeps the disc flat when the dust cover is closed. Now I know a lot of you are probably yelling at the screen right now. Automatic turntables are bad for your records. They scratch them, they damage the spindle hole, they mess up the labels. You're probably right about all of that, and I am not here to dispute it. But what's interesting to me is that on a relatively low-end turntable, they actually included that little stabilizer thing. Good or bad, we have to see it work. You place the disc on the spindle. Don't mind the weird angle, that's what the hat is for. The stabilizer levels the disc out. Then you set your speed, 33 in this case. Choose the size of the disc. Looks like 12 inches, but let's be sure. Yep. Then press start. The platter begins to spin, the spindle drops the disc, and the tone arm automatically drops the stylus at the beginning of the record. And like that, you're listening to Iron Maiden. The stylus in this case is the original factory moving magnet cartridge, which, based on how it was set up in the house, has seen very little use. In fact, these people didn't even own any records anymore. They hadn't for years, is what I was told. But that gets us into cartridges, so let's talk about that for a second. I'm not going to drag you guys down the physics rabbit hole too far with this one, don't worry. But we are going to touch on some basic principles of electromagnetism for this. And this is grossly oversimplified, so please just bear with me, okay? The pickup on the cartridge consists of 4 parts for our purposes. A tiny little stylus that rides in the groove of the record, a cantilever arm that transfers the motions of the stylus up to a little magnet, which moves in sync with the stylus, and a pair of wire coils that convert those motions into electrical signals. We're going to skip over moving coil cartridges for now, but the physics is basically the same. Remember from junior high that moving a magnet past a coil of wire induces an electric current in the wire. Its magnitude and direction correspond to the speed and direction you move the magnet. That's what's happening in the stylus. But cleverly, they do it in 2 90-degree offset directions that correspond to a stereo signal. If you've ever wondered, the stylus doesn't just go side to side. It also goes up, down, and everywhere in between. Going back to junior high again, the little magnet inside is very weak, and the tiny coils of wire only have a few loops on them. Combine that with the very tiny motions of the stylus, and you don't get a very big voltage coming off of the cartridge. But it's a relatively unmodified, albeit very quiet, signal. That's one part of it. There's another part to this though. You see, lower frequencies on a record equate to slower motion of the magnet, and slower motion on the magnet means a slightly weaker signal. That leaves a little bit treble heavy signal if it's just recorded and played back as is. So what someone figured out early on was you can either make bigger grooves that shake the magnet around more and you get a more accurate signal, or you can go in and tweak the bass and treble to sober up the lines a little. And that's what they did, because it allowed a lot more grooves to be stacked side by side on the records and therefore more recording time. Marketing. So getting back to line outputs, your phono output is very quiet. Compare that to the line level outputs of everything else, which can be orders of magnitude louder. Everything from 8-tracks to modern PlayStations output at roughly the same volume level, which is boosted to a consistent output by internal circuitry. But there's no such boosting on record players, so the job of boosting the signal falls on the amplifier. That's why amps and receivers have a phono amp built in. Those that don't require a standalone phono preamp to get to line level outputs. I also want to point out that moving magnet and moving coil cartridges output at different levels. The moving coils are quieter than the moving magnet ones. Some amps will have a switch on them that selects the correct amplification, except when they don't, because sometimes they won't. So yeah, that's that whole thing. Shall we get back to the turntable? Let's. This thing is damn near perfect. The dust cover doesn't have a scratch on it. There's no big nicks, no cigarette burns like I find on so many pieces, or parts where the cord melted into the plastic somehow. I feel like I shouldn't even be messing with it. So let's crack it open, yeah? If you lift up the rubber slip mat, you can see the motor and belt. To get the platter off, you would just remove this little snap ring and lift it off. Make sure you remove the 45 adapter and lock the tone arm before you flip it over. There are 8 screws on the bottom that hold the MDF cover on. Once they're out, the cover comes right off. Not much going on in here. The start and disk size switches are just mechanical linkages. The only electronic switch is the speed selector. You have the PCB for the motor in the one corner, and you can see where the stylus is wired directly into the RCA outputs. Let's also not forget the little springy feet. So yeah, that's the Panasonic SL-H203 turntable. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you guys get to go out and find some cool electronics at estate sales also. And as always, stay metal.